everyone. Happy holidays, and thanks so much for tuning in for today's virtual workshop. Of course, the theme is a Christmas centerpiece, so we're going to be creating a beautiful red and green lush holiday table centerpiece, and we'll talk you through step by step how to make something for your table. A couple of little housekeeping notes before we get started. If you have purchased a ticket to class, you should have gotten a kit with a vase. Today we are using our favorite Gemma bowl from Accent Decor, which is a beautiful gold vessel. And to prep the vase, we're going to need to fill it with a floral foam. It is a little bit too shallow to be using with water, so we're going to foam it. Everyone should have gotten 2 dry bricks of foam, which need to be pre-soaked before class. In order to do this, you'll need to fill either a sink or a deep vessel with water. And just throw your bricks in, leave them alone for 5 to 10 minutes so they can fully soak down into the water, and then cut them with a knife to shape to fill your vase. And I'm going to hold my vase up slightly so you can see. I've got foam covering most of my vase, and then I've got 2 little empty spots on either side, and that's going to allow me to add water daily to my arrangement. So you definitely don't need to fill the entire vase. I would fill most of it and then leave a little water reservoir off to the side. Um, when you're handling foam, you never want to push it beneath the water because you could wind up with a big air pocket in the center of your foam. So just throw it in a bucket or the sink, walk away for a while, and then come back when it's fully soaked in the water. You should also have gotten an ingredient list. So if you want to reference the names of the flowers that we're designing with, that's there. And of course, the most important part, everyone should have gotten a beautiful bucket of flowers and greenery to design with. You'll need some type of tool to design. So I'm going to be using 2 different tools. I love to design with a floral knife. So I'm got my trusty yellow knife with me. And then I also have my favorite pair of clippers. I swear by the ARS brand of clipper, which you can buy on Amazon, but any type of floral clipper or floral shear will work just fine. So without further ado, we will jump into design. I know many of you have taken virtual workshop after virtual workshop, but if you're new to class, one of the nice things about taking class virtually is that you can push pause as many times as you would like. So if you're designing at a little bit slower of a pace than I'm teaching, just pause me and restart or rewind however many times you need to. So with our Gemma bowl, we're going to begin by adding greenery to kind of trace out the shape of the design and lay a base. And I am going to be creating an oblong or kind of a football shaped design for my table because I have a rectangular table. So this is an extremely versatile vase. So you can create a rounded centerpiece if you'd like, or you can create something a little bit more oblong like what I am doing. So you can edit as you go, but I really love a slightly oblong arrangement. So when I I'm going to start with my magnolia first because it is just big. I want to get it in first and out of the way. So I'm going to pull my magnolia out of my bucket. And we've got a really generous amount of magnolia. We actually have a really generous amount of greenery in general. So this time of year, the way that we create a really lush arrangement is just by layering in a bunch of greenery. So that's kind of what we're going to be doing today. But with our magnolia, each stem is going to look a little different. So this is just a single straight stem. This stem has a fork in it. It's got a lateral. So if you've got a stem that has a fork in it, you can break it into smaller pieces, which is what I'm going to do. And then I'm just going to start inserting my magnolia. The really important thing when you're handling greenery is to make sure that you strip any of your low-lying leaves. So I'm just peeling off the lower leaves and exposing just a clean stem with a little burst of greenery on top. I am going to save these leaves off to the side, and I'll talk to you in a minute about what you can do with them. But I'm going to use my clippers to cut my stems down a little bit shorter. And again, I'm making an oblong arrangement. So I'm going to focus on adding my magnolia to this side and to this side. I'm going to leave the other sides naked for now. So just adding the magnolia to 2 sides to begin with. You'll notice that oftentimes when I handle magnolia, I'm not even using clippers. I'm just ripping the stems in half with my hands. That's not a good way to design for 99.9% of your greenery stems and your flowers, but magnolia will last and last and last in a vase if you cut it with your hands. Doesn't make a big difference if you get a nice deep angled cut or if you just break it with your hands. So sometimes I'll cheat a little bit. It's fast just to rip the magnolia in half, and it does not affect the vase life of the magnolia at all. So I've got two pieces now, and I'm going to step to the side from time to time because it's easier to see my design on the white wall rather than on my body. So this is how I'm starting, and I'm just going to continue to fan out my magnolia in this direction. You can hear our doorbell for the shop in the background. It is a Christmas themed jingle, and it's been ringing off the hook this morning. So if you hear a little Christmas music as I design, that's what that is. So I'm just going to keep inserting my magnolia, and I'm focusing mostly on elongating the sides of my arrangement, but I do want to make sure to blend the magnolia into the center a little bit as well. So I'll put just one piece in the center. And with my leaves that I've pulled off, like these guys, I'm going to go ahead and just insert a few of them into the foam as well. So just popping in a couple. I still am going to have leftover leaves that I probably can't use in my arrangement. And if you have a use for them, save them. I love using little magnolia leaves to make place cards for my holiday table. So if you've got a gold Sharpie at home, you can just write everybody's name on a magnolia leaf, and it's so chic to tuck into the napkin or put in each individual place setting. So don't toss these. There are many uses for magnolia leaves around the home at this time of year. So I've got just a couple more pieces that I didn't get to. I'm just going to put them off to the side. Maybe I'll add more in later, but this is the coverage that I've got. And you can see that I've really concentrated my magnolia here on the ends, and I haven't done a lot in the center yet because I have more greenery to add there. The next type of greenery that I'm going to reach for is going to be my fir. Okay, so this is a Douglas fir. It is my favorite of all the firs. I never knew that I would grow to be an adult who had very specific types of fir that I like, but here we are. I'm very partial to Douglas. And I'm going to cut my Douglas fir stems down into smaller bits and pieces that are more usable for my design. So as I make cuts, I'll come closer to the camera. I like to cut where it can be hidden. So if you see, I'm just chopping right here. So my cut is just hidden down in this little V. It's not super noticeable. And I'll do that again, lower down on the stem. There's my next little cut. So I've taken one stem and I've turned it into 3 stems. And of course, each stem of fir is going to be different. You may get 2 pieces or 4 pieces out of the stem. But I'm going to work this in now in between my magnolia and just continue to green up my arrangement. Now, I would make sure that you're getting your stems anchored down into the foam at least a couple of inches. So keep in mind that the water in your vase is going to live at the bottom. So as the foam dries out, your water is going to be down at the bottom. So you want to make sure to get your stems at least an inch or 2 down into the foam. And as we add flowers, that's going to be even more critical. So we're going to be really cautious as the flowers go in that they get even farther down into the vase to drink. So continuing to elongate the ends of my design. And I'm just leaving a lot of nice open space in the middle because that's where my flowers will live. All right, so I love designing on a Lazy Susan because I can easily just spin my arrangement around. And folks always ask, where do you get our Lazy Susans? These are IKEA Lazy Susans, and they're awesome. If you're into floral design, definitely grab a Lazy Susan. All right, so now that I've got my fir in, I am going to next grab for my Nandina foliage. And Nandina is an absolute workhorse this time of year. It is such a plentiful stem and it just fills beautifully. A lot of the Christmas greens like magnolia and the firs can be very heavy. So I like to counteract that with a nice light type of greenery like Nandina. And also love Nandina because it changes color this time of year. So the Nandina is no longer just boring green. It has some color variegation to it. So you'll notice that the Nandina leaves, as you handle them, some of them have started to turn a little bit of like a burgundy red on the tips, which is very pretty. So I'm just going to work my Nandina in as well, just in between the magnolia and the fir. And don't feel like you have to use all of your Nandina. A lot of times I will put as much in as I feel is appropriate in the beginning, and then I will come back behind after the flowers and I'll add more greenery if I want. So you can always add at the end. At this point, we're just more focused on tracing out the shape of our arrangements, and we are also focused on starting to hide our mechanics, which is our floral foam. So we don't want that to be visible at the end of our design. I do like to play around with the stems and have some of them kind of drape or cascade down. So I think it's pretty to have some that kind of have more of a vertical line in the design that come up a little bit higher and some that have some drape. Okay. So I'm going to put the rest of my Nandina off to the side. I'll come back to it later and add more if I'd like. All right, so next up, I'm going to reach for my cedar, which is another type of evergreen. And I've got cedar all over my bucket. It's tangled, of course, so a little difficult to get out. But cedar is a Western red variety. It is really beautiful. And cedar is special in arrangements because it allows us to get a pretty drape. So you can see this stem, it just wants to curve down. So we're going to work with the curve. So if you have a cedar stem that's got really pretty bounce to it, we're going to make sure that as we place that in the design, it continues that line and gives us some pretty spill or drape. So with your cedar stems, we're going to, again, chop them into smaller pieces. So if you look up here, I've got a really nice long lateral. I'm going to just clip that off. So I've separated out that stem. And then I can do the same thing I did with my fir here with my cedar. So I'm just going to try to cut it in an inconspicuous spot. So I've separated, this is now one piece. This is another piece for me to play with. So go ahead and just snip your cedar. And I'm going to identify the pieces that have this beautiful bend or curve to them. And I'm going to position them in the vase so that they do exactly that, so that they kind of curve. So look at how pretty, let me get out of the way so you can see it. But look how beautiful this cedar is just hanging down. So it's giving us that really desirable drape out of the vase. And I always, when I do this, I think of what Home and Garden magazine has told us, and all of the magazines have told us about doing your home planters. You always want to have spill, fill, and thrill. And this is also true for floral design. And so this would be our spill component. So as you're working with the greenery, you'll realize that each piece of greenery brings something different to the table. So the magnolia is getting us like our good structure, and it's bulky and weighty. It also gives us a pop of that chocolate brown color and the richness for the holiday. Our Nandina is a little bit more airy. It lightens things up. Our cedar gets us that beautiful drape. Our fir is a greenery that smells beautiful. It's classic Christmas. So each of them brings something to the table. And I'm really using my cedar now to, again, elongate the sides and also working it in very close to the baseline because I want to be covering and disguising that floral foam. So you'll notice if you look at the line of my arrangement, I've got a lot concentrated down low at the baseline, just covering up my mechanics. All right, so I'm going to pop in my last little bit of cedar, and this is what I am left with. It's starting to really fill in beautifully. And I know it feels like an abundance of greenery. We are getting to the flowers, I promise. There are a lot of them, but this is what gives that lush, beautiful, full feel. So it's a lot of greenery that goes in before the flowers. If we were to just start with the flowers, this would not feel lush when it was done. So there is definitely a lot of light work that needs to go into building a beautiful arrangement before the flowers. Next up, we're going to pop in one of my personal favorites. I'm going to come up closer to the camera so you can see it. This is called Lacutho, and it's a red variety of Lacutho. I think it is super Christmassy when worked in combination with other types of greens. And it also just has a beautiful line to it. So we're going to go ahead and cut these pieces in. I like to allow some of my Lacutho to kind of stand straight up. It's a beautiful vertical element and kind of arches out of the arrangement. So I'm going to put two pieces off to one side to elongate, and then I'll put two pieces off to the other side. This particular vase I had mentioned before is called the Gemma vase, and it's by Accent Decor. That's our main vase wholesaler that we buy a ton of our cool vases and candles from. And the Gemma bowl is a bowl that we buy probably, I don't know, we must buy 5,000 a year. I don't know, a million of these vases we buy. They're at an unbelievable price point and they just fill beautifully. So we use them by the pallet. We really love them. And we've never used them, I don't know why, for a workshop before. So I'm excited to be using them for a workshop. I hope you guys love this vase too. And it's definitely a keeper. When you're done with this arrangement, you can reuse it over and over again. So it's an awesome little vase. Anyway, we're going to now have in the last piece of greenery. I know everyone probably has greenery fatigue at this point, but we're going to mix in a little bit of seeded eucalyptus. It's just awesome texture. So it's got fairies on it. It has a little bit of drape as well. We're just going to work this in. So I've got a nice big cluster off to the front. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And I'm not using all of my seeded eucalyptus. I'm just going to save a little bit for the end in case I want to spot fill. But at this point, I feel really happy with the amount of coverage I have, and I feel like we've got a pretty good shape traced out. If you are looking at your green up and you're thinking, gosh, that looks really wild, pause me for a second and work on just cutting down your stem height a little bit. So really assess if you've got too much height and wild going on. You can just chop down the stems a little bit and bring it closer to the base and you'll feel better about it. So I'll spin mine a couple more times just so you can kind of review what this looks like. I would say I kind of doubled the size. So if the base is a 6-inch diameter, I'm probably kicked out closer to like a 12 or 14-inch total footprint on my widest side. And then my skinniest side is really pretty skinny. Like this is probably a 7 or 8-inch footprint. So definitely as an oblong arrangement, it's much wider on one side. All right, so our next ingredient that we're going to start with is our beautiful ornamental kale. Everyone should have some really gorgeous white and green kale, which is just perfect for Christmas. So kale comes always looking a little haggard when it comes in from our distributors. We buy this from Holland this time of year, and it's just a beautiful wintry seasonal accent, but it does need to be conditioned and prepped to go into the vase. So with our kale, there's a couple of things I'm going to do. The first is I'm going to just peel away all of these lower leaves. I'm going to get rid of anything that looks discolored and yucky, and also just take out some of the weight of the kale. It is so much more manageable when it's just the top portion rather than like a big honking kale to try to get in the vase. And then I'm going to just reflex my petals very slightly. Now, I don't want to get carried away, but I am just going to kind of fan open this kale gently and really allow it to shine. So that's what my kale looks like after I've cleaned it up a little bit. It is much prettier. And I love this little bit of white going into the arrangement against all of the dark, rich reds, browns, greens. I'm going to cut my stem down to a much smaller size, probably a 5 or 6-inch stem length, because I'm going to want my kale to sit lower down to the baseline. This is not an element that is good looking flying out of your vase. So it's definitely something that we're going to use really tucked down low in your arrangement. And I'm going to spin so you can see. So see how I've got this kale just nestled down, sitting right on the rim of the vase. And that's where I like them. So I'm going to go ahead and condition my kale. As you condition your kale, give it a sniff. Smells just like a vegetable. It is a vegetable. So I've got my other one positioned on the other side, also low, and I'm just going to do the same thing again and again. So the kale of all the flowers we're using is definitely not the sexy flower. Okay, no one gets really jazzed about kale, so that's why we're keeping it nice and low. And it's just kind of eating up some space in our vase. So I've got this other kale nestled here, and I'll put my fourth one in on the other side. So it's fine to use some flowers that are not like super sexy and thrilling, right? Like hydrangea is another one of those flowers. It serves its purpose. It fills up some of the space, and it's a really pretty accent to the more focal flowers. So now that I've got my kale in, I would say this arrangement is really starting to fill in. I'm not seeing a ton of voids and open spaces. So now I'm ready to work in more of my focal flowers that will kind of sit a little bit more on top of the greenery in the kale and be more of the star of the show. So I'm going to begin with my roses. And so we've got a few different varieties of rose today. I'm going to show you all of them. They're all red, so they complement each other really beautifully, but they are different shapes and textures. So we like to bring interest into our arrangements. Okay, so the first variety of rose that we're working with is our Freedom Rose. Now, I don't want to call this a basic rose, but it is kind of a basic rose. So Freedom is grown in mass quantities. It's just a tried and true red rose variety that everybody knows and uses. Next up, we've got Hearts, which are a newer variety. They're definitely not new by any standard, but they are newer than a Freedom, and they are more ruffly. So you get a higher petal count. It's a little bit of a swirly shape in the center. They're very pretty. And then the roses that everyone will get excited about are our garden roses. And we are using an exquisite, beautiful piano garden rose. So these are really bulbous shaped. They look kind of like a peony, and they've got these really pretty little buds that will not open, but great texture. So with all of our roses, we're going to need to put in a little bit of elbow grease to get these spiffed up for the vase. So the first thing we do when we handle a rose is we always want to take the greenery off. So we're going to begin by doing that. And after I take the greenery off, I'm going to next attack the petals. So the petals are always going to come in 100% of the time from the farm looking a little disheveled. And we call the outer petals the guard petals. And that's usually the part of the rose that needs to be cleaned up. So we're going to very carefully remove the outermost petals. As you do so, you'll notice that the outer petals are a lot tougher in texture than the inner petals. And it's actually, even though it looks like a petal, it's a part of the leaf structure of the rose, and it's what protected the rose when it was a bud. So I'm going to go ahead and just yank off anything that's discolored or bruised or doesn't look great. I am not, however, going to take off these green pieces called the sepals. If you take these off as the rose ages, it is going to lose its petals, it'll shatter, so we want to leave those on. As far as the number of guard petals that need to come off on each rose, it is going to really depend on each individual rose. Some roses need 1 or 2 guard petals taken off, and other roses need 5, 6, 7 guard petals taken off. And it does not hurt the rose to take more or less petals off. The one thing we do want to be careful of is we never want to handle the face of the rose. So the face of the rose is the pretty part of the rose, and that is what is really prone to bruising. So if you really get in there and massage your rose and touch it and mess with it, it will start to bruise. So we really only want to handle the rose from the side. So just taking off petals from the side, don't touch anything else. So we're going to go ahead and condition all of our roses. Now, because I work with flowers every day, usually I move a little bit faster than our workshop students on conditioning roses. So if you lose me, just pause me and finish cleaning up your roses, and then you can restart the video. So I'm just going to make a pile of my cleaned roses as I go. Now, every single year around the major flower holidays, and I would consider Christmas one of the 4 major holidays. There's Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, Thanksgiving, and Christmas. And that's where you see huge spikes in flower buying worldwide. Christmas, of course, everyone is trying to get their hands on red roses and some white roses. So we see a little bit of a decline in the health of roses around the major flower holidays. We try to mitigate that by buying direct from the farms and kind of cutting out a lot of the middlemen, and that does help. But regardless, you do see a little bit of a fall off in quality of flowers around the major holidays. So we've done our best with your buckets, But just understand that as you are looking at your flowers, it's the same reason why if you can avoid buying a red rose for Valentine's Day, you should. Opting for like a hot pink rose, you generally get a healthier rose. But I think the rose quality of the farms we bought from this year is actually pretty good. I'm feeling really pleased looking at these roses that they're healthy. You can always tell when you're handling roses. One of the dead giveaways, if you've got an old or a bad rose, is looking at the leaves. And if the leaves look like Dorito chips, that's usually a bad product. And these leaves look beautiful. So I think we got some good ones. All right. So now that we are past our greenery and kale, as we handle our roses, we are definitely going to take a lot more care in cutting our stems to a nice long length, and making sure that they really get deep into our floral foam so that they can drink water. So make sure from this point on, as you are inserting your stems, you're really pushing them nice deep down into the base. And the most important thing you can do to keep your flowers happy and healthy going into the holiday is just to make sure that they are getting a lot of water, especially in arrangements where you use a lot of greenery and Christmas greenery and the firs. Those type of stems will drink a ton of water. They will just suck the moisture right out of the vase. So you want to make sure that you are adding water once a day just to keep everything happy. All right, so now that I've got a nice big pile of conditioned roses, this is my pile, I'm going to start adding these guys in. And I'm going to cut my stems always on an angle. I'll come up to show you what that looks like. So your flowers always want to have a nice angled cut on the stem. It's easier to do with a floral knife, but you can definitely do it with clippers. You just want to cut on a diagonal. And the reason this is significant is all of your flowers pull their water or drink their water through the bottom of the stem, obviously. And the more surface area you open, the more water the flower can drink. So think of it like trying to drink water out of a coffee stirrer versus switching to a big gulp straw. You can get a lot more water uptake with a bigger, deeper cut. So that's why we always emphasize cutting on an angle. And I'm also leaving my stem length long enough so that I can really push my stem deep down into the foam towards the bottom of the vase. So I would say my stem is sitting at about 7 or 8 inches of length. And I'm going to begin working my roses in. Now, because we have a lot of greenery and a lot of stems in this arrangement, you are going to find some resistance as you try to put your stems in. So I would recommend if you are fighting with your roses, they're not going in where you want them to go in, just try moving the stem a half an inch to one side or the other, and they should slide right in. You never want to try to force a rose where it doesn't want to go, or a flower, because you will wind up with broken stems over and over again. So just be patient, take deep breaths, and just try moving one direction to the right or left. Now I am continuing to work in my oblong shape, so I'm putting roses kind of fanning out to one side a little bit, and eventually I'll start working some in as well to the middle of my design. All right. So I'll continue to spin so you can see. All right, and I'm also kind of stacking my height. So I like to have my roses kind of sit at a slant or an angle. So they're at different heights in my design. So you can play around with that as you go. And it's totally fine to have some of your roses kind of sit a little bit on top of your cabbage or kale. So see how I just nestled this guy? He's sitting on top of the cabbage. That is fine as well. It's fine for your flowers to touch. They're not going to hurt each other. Now, as I'm handling my heart roses, which are the more ruffled roses, you'll notice that the thorns are crazy. So just be really careful as you handle them. They will try to bite you. Look at this stem. I don't know if you can see it from this far back, but hearts are widely known in our industry to have some of the gnarliest thorns. They're beautiful, but just crazy thorns. So look at thorns. If they bother you, you can just pop them off with your fingers. I sometimes, if I'm designing in foam, won't really go out of my way to remove them. I'll just be careful not to hurt myself as I go. All right. You'll notice as I arrange, sometimes I blow on the face of my roses. Now, the reason I do that is because roses are extremely sensitive to warm air. So if you're trying to get a rose to relax a little bit, you can just blow on the petals and they'll start to unfurl. So that's a fun little trick. It only works on roses. So if you try to blow on a tulip or a hydrangea, you're just going to look nuts. So only the roses. And my last roses that I'm popping in are the garden roses. I've saved these for last because they are, in my opinion, the most beautiful. And garden roses typically are 2 to 3 times the cost of a regular rose. So it's on par with peony pricing or more expensive. And I want to make sure that they really are visible where I put them. So I've got my one garden rose kind of towards the center so I can appreciate and see him really nicely. And I'm going to do a similar positioning on the other side of my arrangement for my other garden rose. So there's my other one right there. So now I've got all of my red roses in. We could totally stop at this point. The arrangement looks full, but what fun would that be? So we're going to continue to add more and more of our ingredients. Now I am going to quickly press pause because I'm realizing in all of my preparation, I forgot to grab my pine cones for my arrangement. So I'm going to dart off and pull 5 pine cones and I'll be right back. Okay, back in action. So I've collected my pine cones. We buy pine cones by the thousands for each Christmas season that are pre-staked. So you can see they've got a little dab of hot glue and they're attached to a little stem. This particular pine cone manufacturer has the best stems. So these stems are all super bendy. So you can manipulate the stem however you like, and they're cute little pine cones. These are 1 to 3 inch grade pine cones, so they're perfect to pop into a centerpiece. And we're going to add the pine cones now because I don't want to do this after I put my finishing delicate flowers. And I'm going to just nestle these in all over, and they are so perfect next to the magnolia. I love, playing up the brown in this design. It feels like very Ralph Lauren to me. I think it's really elevated and cutesy. So we're going to just work these in. I like to put a few of them down around the rim of the vase. So I'm going to really get in there. And because these are stemmed, you can kind of force them to sit wherever you like. So I've got one little pine cone here sitting right on the rim of the vase. And I think I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So I've got another one right here kind of falling out of the vase. And let's see, where am I going to put my last one? Do another one on this end. Okay, so I've now got all of my pine cones filled in, and they're so beautiful. You can get pine cones that are sprayed gold or silver, and they also make a flocked pine cone that looks like it's a little snowy. But I think the classiest pine cones are the natural brown pine cones. So that's what we usually gravitate towards. And next, we're just going to add our finishing ingredients. We have some red berries because it would not be Christmas without red berries. And then we also have some beautiful white thistle. The red berries, I'll come a little bit closer, are hypericum berry. And we buy the burgundy hypericum rather than the bright red. I think it just looks a little bit more expensive. So I like the richness of the burgundy. And I'm going to peel back all of my low-lying leaves. So I've got a nice clean stem to work with. And then I'm just going to pop these in. They're super small, so they're easy to get in wherever you like. And I do think the berries are just such a fun, pretty touch. Everybody loves a berry for Christmas. So we'll just pop these in. If you wanted to add an extra something special to your arrangement, you could certainly pop in other types of fruits. You could pop in like a little pomegranate. I love working in orange sometimes to Christmas arrangements. So you could pop in like a few little clementines would be really pretty. Persimmon. You could definitely add fruit in here and it would be so appropriate and beautiful. Give you kind of like a Williamsburg type feel. There is our Christmas doorbell again, if you can hear it, playing Wish You a Merry Christmas. I think we all are starting to go nuts with that doorbell here. And this is the last ingredient. This is one of my favorites. So I love thistle all the time, but I especially love the white thistle for the holiday season. It is so healthy and beautiful and long lasting. and just a really pretty lighter accent to all of the rich reds and browns. So I'm going to start working this in wherever I've got a nice void in my arrangement. So right here, for example, I'm going to pop a thistle in, look at the pretty texture. Now, if you have a piece of thistle that has some longer laterals that you can separate, feel free to do what we did with the greenery and just chop off a piece and use it as an individual stem. That is totally allowed and fine to do. So just work this in wherever you've got a spot for it. Now, I obviously made a really oblong arrangement because I have a rectangular dining room table, but you can see how you could really easily modify this arrangement and make it more circular or round if you had a round kitchen or dining table. So I hope you have created something that fills your table really well. I'm just popping in my last little bit of thistle. Okay, great. So this is my finished arrangement with all of the ingredients added. I would take a second and look over your arrangement and see if you've got any holes or visible foam. And the problem area for most new designers is certainly down at the baseline. So inspect, and sometimes it's easier to do if you look at it up at eye level to see if there's anything visible that you do not want to see, and then use the extra greenery just to plug the holes. To keep this fresh and beautiful leading up to the holiday, a couple of things that you can do. Make sure that your flowers don't ever sit in really direct, intense sunlight. So flowers in a cut stage do not benefit from sunlight. They don't want to sit in a sunny window. And they also don't want to sit directly under a heat vent or a heat duct. The most important thing you can do is just adding water. So your flowers are not going to be hurt by coming in contact with water. I recommend sticking the entire arrangement into your kitchen sink and just putting the faucet on a slow drip so flour can really run down into the foam, and keep watering until it is literally overflowing with water. Doing that once a day will get you a really nice long base life out of your arrangement. And I think that's it. If you have questions, please feel free to send us a DM, comment on the video, reach out to the shop. We'd be happy to take your calls. And I hope everybody has a very, very happy holiday, gets lots of rest, eats lots of good food, sees friends and family. And we really hope to see you in the new year. We just released our full workshop calendar through the end of 2025. So there are dozens of workshops. Hopefully we will see you in one. And Happy New Year. Thanks so much.